I was folding baby clothes when Miles walked into the nursery and shattered my world. Tiny yellow onesies and soft white blankets were spread across the changing table, each piece carefully washed and arranged for our daughter's arrival in just 4 weeks. The room smelled like lavender fabric softener and fresh paint from the walls we'd finished the weekend before. My hands were gentle on a miniature sleeper, decorated with dancing elephants when he cleared his throat behind me. "Charlotte, we need to talk." Something in his voice made my blood turn cold. Not the tone of someone about to discuss dinner plans or weekend errands. This was the voice of a man about to deliver devastating news. I turned slowly, one hand instinctively moving to cradle my enormous belly where our daughter was performing her nightly gymnastics routine. "I'm moving out," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Tonight I've already packed." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my knees go weak, and I had to grip the changing table to stay upright. "What do you mean you're moving out?" "Miles, I'm 8.5 months pregnant with your child." "That's just it, Charlotte." He finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his brown eyes. Not guilt, not even sadness. Cold determination. "It's not just my child anymore. Jessica's pregnant too, with my son. And I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend this is what I want." The room spun around me. Jessica, his 24-year-old research assistant at the biotech company where he worked as a senior developer. The girl with long blonde hair and a master's degree who'd been working late with him for months on what he called critical projects. The girl whose name had started appearing in his conversations with increasing frequency over the past 6 months. "A son?" The words came out as barely a whisper. "She's 22 weeks along, we found out last week." He was speaking faster now, as if speed could somehow lessen the impact of his words. "Charlotte, I never meant for this to happen, but I can't deny what I feel. I love her, and she's giving me the family I've always dreamed of. I am Charlotte Elizabeth Morrison, 31 years old, and until this moment, I thought I was living the life I'd always dreamed of. For the past 3 years, I'd been the primary breadwinner in our household, working as a senior systems analyst for a major healthcare company while Miles pursued his passion projects and startup dreams. I'd supported us financially, emotionally, and practically while he found his footing in the tech world. I'd been the one to suggest he take the position at Biogen Solutions, even though it meant a significant pay cut, because I believed in his potential and wanted him to be happy. Now, standing in the nursery we'd painted together just days ago, I realized that my dedication and sacrifice had been repaid with the ultimate betrayal. Not only was my husband leaving me for another woman, but he was abandoning me and our unborn daughter for his pregnant mistress and their son. The son he claimed to have always dreamed of, as if our daughter was somehow a consolation prize. "Miles," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "you're telling me you've been having an affair, got another woman pregnant, and now you're leaving me 4 weeks before our baby is due." "I know how it sounds, but do you?" I interrupted. "Because it sounds like you're abandoning your pregnant wife for your pregnant mistress. It sounds like you've been living a double life for months while I've been preparing for our first child and supporting your career. It sounds like you're the kind of man who walks away from his responsibilities the moment something more appealing comes along." He had the grace to flinch. "It's not like that, Charlotte. I'll still support the baby. Financially, I mean. But I can't stay married to you. Not when I'm in love with someone else." I was still holding the elephant sleeper, and I looked down at it now, this tiny garment for the daughter whose father was abandoning her before she was even born. My hands were shaking, but my mind was becoming clearer by the second. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Jessica has an apartment downtown. I'll be staying there for now until we find something bigger, something suitable for—" He gestured vaguely, unable to say "our family" in front of me. "And work? Have you told anyone at Biogen about your situation?" Something flickered across his face. "That's not your concern anymore, Charlotte." But I could see it was very much his concern. Biogen Solutions had strict policies about workplace relationships, especially between supervisors and subordinates. Miles wasn't just Jessica's colleague, he was her direct supervisor, responsible for her performance reviews and project assignments. The power dynamic alone would be problematic, but an affair resulting in pregnancy while he was married? That could cost him everything. My sister Emma appeared in the nursery doorway, her face pale. She'd been in the Kit Sullivan making dinner and must have heard raised voices. "Charlotte, is everything okay?" "Miles is leaving," I said simply. "He's been having an affair with his research assistant, and she's pregnant." Emma's mouth fell open. She looked from me to Miles, then back to me. Are you serious? Charlotte, you're about to have a baby. I'm aware, Miles said coldly, but I can't live a lie anymore. A lie? Emma's voice rose to a shout. You mean your marriage? Your commitment to your wife and unborn child? Those are lies to you? Emma, please, I said quietly. Let Miles pack his things and go. I think we've heard enough. But I hadn't heard enough. Not nearly enough. As Miles gathered his belongings from our bedroom, as Emma helped me sit down on the couch and brought me a glass of water, as I felt our daughter kicking against my ribs, as if she could sense the chaos erupting around her, my mind was already working. Truth is, I wasn't completely surprised, not by the affair itself, but by the timing and brazenness of his announcement. For months, I'd been noticing changes in Miles that I'd explained away as work stress or excitement about becoming a father. But now, looking back with the clarity that comes from devastating revelation, I could see the pattern. It had started in February, about 6 months ago. Miles had begun working later and more frequently, often not coming home until 9 or 10 o'clock on weeknights. When I asked about the long hours, he explained that Biogen was in a critical phase of development on a new pharmaceutical tracking system, and as the lead developer, he needed to be present for every major decision. At first, I'd been proud of his dedication. After years of watching him struggle to find his place in the tech world, it seemed like he'd finally found a position where his skills were valued and his input was essential. I encouraged him to put in whatever hours were necessary, even when it meant I was handling most of the pregnancy preparations alone. Then came the weekend work sessions. Miles would leave Saturday mornings for what he called strategy meetings and return Sunday evenings exhausted but oddly energized. He'd talk about breakthrough moments and collaborative breakthroughs, his eyes bright with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen in years. I thought it was professional passion. Now I realized it was infatuation. The business trips started in April, sudden conferences and client meetings that required immediate travel. Miles would pack quickly and disappear for 3 or 4 days at a time, returning with vague stories about productive meetings and promising developments. He always brought me small gifts from these trips: a candle from Portland, chocolates from Denver, a scarf from Austin. I'd been touched by his thoughtfulness. Now I wondered if they were guilt offerings. His phone habits changed too. Miles had always been casual about his phone, leaving it on counters and charging stations, occasionally asking me to check his messages when he was driving. But starting around March, his phone became an extension of his hand. He took it to the bathroom, kept it on his nightstand, with the screen facing down, and developed a habit of stepping outside to take calls. When I commented on his increased phone use, he explained that Biogen's clients were in different time zones, requiring him to be available for urgent communications at odd hours. It seemed reasonable. I was busy with my own demanding job and the exhausting reality of pregnancy. I had neither the energy nor the inclination to question his explanations. The most obvious change had been in our physical relationship. For the first 6 months of my pregnancy, Miles had been attentive and affectionate, adjusting to my changing body with patience and tenderness. But starting in March, he'd become distant and distracted. He blamed it on work stress and concern about hurting the baby, explanations that seemed reasonable given his lack of experience with pregnancy. Looking back, I realized that March was exactly when Jessica would have started working directly with Miles on their critical project. March was when his late nights began, when his weekend strategy sessions started, when his phone became surgically attached to his hand. March was when he stopped seeing me as his wife and started seeing me as an obstacle to his new life. But here's what Miles didn't know about me. I don't crumble under pressure. I analyze, I strategize, and I act. 3 years of being the primary breadwinner while supporting his career dreams hadn't been an act of blind devotion. It had been an investment in our future, and I'd made that investment with the same careful planning I brought to every major decision in my life. So while Miles packed his belongings that night, while Emma fussed over me and urged me to call my parents, while our unborn daughter performed acrobatics against my increasingly tight belly, I made some quiet moves of my own. First, I transferred half of our joint checking account balance to my personal savings account. Miles had contributed sporadically to our joint finances over the past year, while my steady paycheck had been the foundation of our financial stability. If he wanted to start a new life with Jessica, he could do it without the cushion I'd provided. Second, I photographed every important document in our house: marriage certificate, insurance policies, mortgage papers, Miles's employment contract, our tax returns, medical records, investment account statements. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud storage account that only I could access. Third, I changed the passwords on all the online accounts I managed. Our mortgage company, insurance providers, utility companies, streaming services, and subscription accounts. Miles had never been interested in handling household administration, preferring to let me manage the boring stuff while he focused on his career. Now that disinterest would work in my favor. Fourth, I sent a carefully worded email to my boss, explaining that I would need to adjust my work schedule due to an urgent personal situation. I didn't provide details, but I requested permission to work remotely for the following week while I handled some complicated family matters. My track record as a reliable employee bought me the flexibility I needed. Finally, I did something that would prove to be the most important decision of the entire ordeal. I called my college roommate Emily, who was now a family law attorney in the city. We'd stayed in touch over the years, and she'd been one of the first people I'd told about my pregnancy. If I was about to become a single mother, I needed to understand my rights and options. Charlotte? Emily's voice was warm but concerned when she answered my call at nearly 10 o'clock that night. Is everything okay? Is the baby? The baby's fine, I said quietly, standing in my Kit Sullivan, while Miles loaded his car in the driveway. But I need legal advice. Miles just told me he's leaving me for his pregnant mistress. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. Are you serious? Charlotte, you're about to give birth. I'm very serious, and I need to know what my options are. Okay, Emily said, her voice shifting into professional mode. First, don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and don't make any major financial decisions without talking to me first. Second, can you come to my office tomorrow morning? We need to discuss this in detail. I'll be there. When Miles finally left that night, taking 2 suitcases and a box of personal items, I stood at the living room window and watched his taillights disappear down our tree-lined street. Emma sat beside me on the couch, one hand on my shoulder. I can't believe he just left, she said. Charlotte, what are you going to do? I'm going to protect my daughter, I said simply, and I'm going to make sure Miles faces the consequences of his choices. I slept surprisingly well that night, considering the circumstances. Perhaps it was emotional exhaustion, or perhaps it was the relief of finally understanding what had been happening in my marriage for months. When I woke up the next morning, our daughter was performing her usual morning dance routine, and I felt calmer and more focused than I had in weeks. The first thing I did was call in sick to work, something I'd done fewer than 5 times in my 3 years with the company. Then I showered, dressed in the most professional maternity outfit I owned, and drove to Emily's law office downtown. Emily Martinez Sullivan was exactly the kind of attorney I needed. Brilliant, thorough, and absolutely ruthless when protecting her clients' interests. We'd been friends since freshman year of college, and she'd built her reputation handling complex family law cases involving high-net-worth individuals and complicated financial situations. Her office was on the 15th floor of a gleaming downtown building, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Emily greeted me with a careful hug, her dark eyes assessing my emotional state with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen plenty of devastated spouses. How are you holding up? She asked, as we settled into the comfortable chairs in her consultation area. Better than expected, I said honestly. I think the shock is wearing off, and now I'm focused on what comes next. Good, that's the right mindset. Emily opened a legal pad and clicked her pen. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning, and don't leave out any details, no matter how small or embarrassing they might seem. I spent the next 2 hours walking Emily through the timeline of Miles' behavior changes, the details of his announcement, and everything I knew about his relationship with Jessica. She took notes constantly, occasionally asking clarifying questions or requesting specific dates and details. Okay, Emily said when I finished. Let's talk about your immediate situation and your long-term options. First, the good news, you're in a much stronger position than you probably realize. She flipped to a fresh page on her legal pad. You've been the primary breadwinner for most of your marriage, you own the house jointly, and you have an excellent employment history. From a financial perspective, you're not dependent on Miles, which gives you significant leverage. What about custody? I asked. Can he try to take my daughter? He can try, but his chances of getting primary custody are virtually zero. You're the stable parent with the steady income and the established home. He's the one who abandoned his pregnant wife for his mistress. No family court judge is going to look favorably on that behavior. Emily leaned forward, her expression becoming more intense. But Charlotte, there's something else we need to discuss. You mentioned that Miles is Jessica's direct supervisor at work. Yes, she's his research assistant, and she's 24 years old, while he's what, 33? 34 as of last month. Emily made a note. This could be much bigger than a simple divorce case. If Miles has been having a sexual relationship with a subordinate employee, especially one who's significantly younger, that's a serious violation of workplace policy and potentially sexual harassment under federal law. I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite excitement, but a cold satisfaction. What does that mean, practically speaking? It means Miles could lose his job, face a sexual harassment lawsuit, and potentially be liable for significant damages. And if Biogen Solutions knew about the relationship and failed to act, they could be liable too. Emily pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. I want you to meet with someone. David Sullivan, my brother, is an employment attorney who specializes in workplace sexual harassment cases. If what you're telling me is accurate, Miles may have committed career suicide along with marital suicide. I want to pursue every option, I said without hesitation. Miles didn't just betray me personally. He made calculated decisions that put our family's financial security at risk while pursuing an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate employee. If there are consequences for that behavior, I want him to face them. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Emily smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Because I think we can do a lot more than just get you a favorable divorce settlement. I think we can make sure Miles faces real consequences for his choices. She scheduled a meeting with her brother for the following afternoon and gave me a list of additional documents to gather. Bank statements, credit card records, Miles's employment contract, and any communication I might have saved that referenced his work relationship with Jessica. One more thing, Emily said as I prepared to leave. Don't contact Miles directly about anything related to the divorce or his affair. All communication needs to go through me from now on, and if he tries to pressure you into any kind of agreement or reconciliation, refer him to my office immediately. What if he wants to see me, to talk about the baby or the house? Any conversation about shared responsibilities can happen through legal channels. Charlotte, I need you to understand something. Miles is going to realize very quickly that he's made a catastrophic mistake. Not just personally, but professionally and financially. When that happens, he may try to manipulate you into protecting him or minimizing the consequences of his actions. Don't let him. I left Emily's office feeling more empowered than I had since Miles dropped his bombshell. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my situation instead of simply reacting to circumstances beyond my control. But I wasn't done gathering information. If Miles's relationship with Jessica was going to be scrutinized professionally and legally, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. And that meant doing some research of my own. That evening, I settled into my home office with my laptop and began investigating Biogen Solutions' employee policies and corporate structure. What I found exceeded my expectations and confirmed my suspicions that Miles had made an error in judgment that would have far-reaching consequences. Biogen Solutions wasn't just any biotech company. They were a publicly traded corporation with strict ethical guidelines and zero-tolerance policies for sexual harassment and conflicts of interest. Their employee handbook, available on their corporate website, explicitly prohibited romantic relationships between supervisors and subordinates, with immediate termination as the standard consequence for violations. More importantly, Biogen had been in the news recently for their commitment to workplace equality and ethical business practices. Just 6 months ago, their CEO had given an interview to a major business magazine about the company's progressive policies and their industry-leading approach to preventing sexual harassment in the workplace. I printed relevant pages from their employee handbook and corporate policy documents, adding them to the growing file of evidence I was building. Then I turned my attention to Jessica herself, searching for any public information that might be relevant to understanding the scope of Miles's professional misconduct. Jessica Sullivan Williams had an active LinkedIn profile that told an interesting story. She'd graduated from a prestigious university with a master's degree in biochemistry just 18 months ago. Biogen was her first professional position after graduate school, making Miles not just her supervisor, but potentially her first experience navigating workplace dynamics and professional relationships. The age and experience gap between them was even more significant than I'd realized. Miles was a 34-year-old married man with 5 years of industry experience who held a position of authority over a 24-year-old recent graduate in her first professional job. The power dynamic was so obviously problematic that it would be impossible for Miles to claim the relationship was between equals. But the most damaging information came from Jessica's social media profiles. Her Instagram account, set to public, showed a timeline that perfectly aligned with Miles's behavior changes at home. Starting in March, her posts showed frequent photos at upscale restaurants, weekend trips to nearby cities, and expensive jewelry and clothing that seemed inconsistent with a research assistant's salary. One photo, posted in May, showed Jessica wearing a diamond bracelet with the caption, "When he spoils you just because #blessed worth it." Another, from June, featured Jessica in what appeared to be an expensive hotel room with champagne and roses, captioned "Private celebration for two #secret getaway #romance." The most recent posts told an even more damning story. Photos from the past month showed Jessica with a visible baby bump, accompanied by captions like "Growing our little miracle #20 weeks #baby bump #our little secret, and can't wait to start our real life together. #soon to be ours #new beginnings." I screenshotted everything and added it to my evidence file. Jessica's own social media posts created a timeline that would be impossible for Miles to deny or explain away. The expensive gifts, the romantic getaways, the open acknowledgement of a secret relationship, all of it while he was married to me and while she was his subordinate employee. As I compiled this information, I felt a strange sense of gratitude toward Jessica's naivety. Her eagerness to document and share their relationship had created a comprehensive record of Miles's professional misconduct and personal betrayal. Every photo, every caption, every public declaration of their secret love affair was evidence that would be difficult to dispute in any professional or legal proceeding. By the time I finished my research that night, I had a clear picture of the scope of Miles's mistakes. He hadn't just betrayed his marriage. He'd violated his company's ethical standards, potentially committed sexual harassment, and created a paper trail that would make denial impossible. The next morning, I met with David Sullivan, Emily's brother, and an employment attorney who specialized in workplace sexual harassment cases. David's office was in the same building as Emily's, and his reputation for holding corporations accountable for their employees' misconduct was exactly what I needed. "Your situation is more clear-cut than most cases I handle," David said after reviewing the evidence I'd gathered. "Miles is clearly in violation of his company's policies, and the power dynamic between him and Jessica makes this a textbook case of sexual harassment and abuse of authority." "What kind of consequences are we talking about?" I asked. "For Miles personally, immediate termination, forfeiture of any unvested stock options or bonuses, potential difficulty finding employment in the industry. For Biogen, if they knew about the relationship and failed to act, they could face significant liability in a sexual harassment lawsuit." David leaned back in his chair, considering the evidence spread across his desk. "But here's where it gets really interesting, Charlotte. Biogen Solutions has been positioning themselves as an industry leader in workplace ethics and sexual harassment prevention. If this situation becomes public, it's not just a legal problem for them, it's a major public relations disaster. What does that mean for my case? It means they have strong incentives to act quickly and decisively when this information comes to light. Companies in their position often implement immediate consequences to protect their reputation and demonstrate their commitment to their stated values." David opened his calendar and began making notes. "I'm going to contact Biogen's Human Resources Department this afternoon and request a meeting to discuss a serious ethical violation involving one of their employees. I won't provide details over the phone, but I'll make it clear that the situation involves sexual harassment and requires immediate attention." How long before Miles knows that his situation has been reported? That depends on how Biogen chooses to handle the investigation. They might suspend him immediately pending a full review, or they might conduct a preliminary investigation before taking action. Either way, he'll know within a few days that his professional misconduct has been discovered. I left David's office with a meeting scheduled for the following week and instructions to gather any additional evidence of Miles's behavior that might be relevant to the workplace investigation. The machinery of professional and legal consequences was now in motion, and Miles would soon discover that his personal betrayal had professional implications he hadn't anticipated. But I wasn't finished building my case. That afternoon, I did something that felt both satisfying and strategically important. I called Miles's mother, Patricia, and told her exactly what her son had done. Patricia Morrison was a retired schoolteacher with strong opinions about family responsibility and personal integrity. She'd raised Miles and his younger sister as a single mother after their father left when Miles was 12. She'd worked 2 jobs to pay for Miles's college education and had been thrilled when we got married 3 years ago. More importantly, Patricia had been incredibly excited about becoming a grandmother. She'd spent the past 6 months knitting blankets, buying baby clothes, and planning to take time off from her volunteer work to help us during the first few weeks after the baby's arrival. "Charlotte, honey, how are you feeling?" Patricia's voice was warm and affectionate when she answered my call. "Is everything ready for little Emma to arrive?" "Patricia, we need to talk. Can you sit down? I have something difficult to tell you." The silence on the other end of the line told me she'd sensed the seriousness in my voice. "What's wrong? Is the baby okay?" "The baby's fine, but Miles isn't. Patricia, he left me yesterday. He's been having an affair with his coworker, and she's pregnant too. He's moved in with her." I heard what sounded like a sharp intake of breath, followed by a long pause. "Charlotte, are you certain? That doesn't sound like the son I raised." "I'm completely certain. He told me himself. He said he loves her, and that she's giving him the family he's always dreamed of. He walked out 4 weeks before our daughter is due." The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Patricia spoke again, and when she did, her voice had changed completely. "Charlotte Elizabeth Morrison, you listen to me very carefully. That is not the son I raised, and that is not the man I thought he had become. I am ashamed of his behavior and furious at his choices." "Patricia, I know this is hard to hear. Hard to hear. Honey, it's devastating. I've been planning to spend my retirement years being the best grandmother I could be to my grandchildren. Now I find out that my son has abandoned his pregnant wife and unborn daughter for some girl at work, that he's throwing away everything we raised him to value." Patricia's voice was getting stronger and more determined. "Charlotte, I want you to know that my loyalty is with you and my granddaughter. Miles has made his choice and now he needs to face the consequences. What can I do to help you?" The conversation with Patricia was both emotionally satisfying and strategically valuable. Miles's own mother was now firmly in my corner, which would make it much more difficult for him to claim that I was being vindictive or unreasonable. When family members start choosing sides, it sends a clear message about who's in the wrong. But Patricia's support also provided something more immediate and practical. She offered to stay with me during the final weeks of my pregnancy and the first month after the baby's arrival. Having his mother's support during this critical time would not only provide me with the help I needed, but would also demonstrate to everyone, including any future family court proceedings, that even Miles's own family recognized his behavior as unacceptable. As the week progressed, the various threads of my response to Miles's betrayal began to come together in ways that exceeded my expectations. Emily was preparing divorce papers that would protect my financial interests and secure favorable custody arrangements. David was scheduling meetings with Biogen's corporate leadership to address Miles's professional misconduct. Patricia was making plans to provide practical and emotional support during the transition to single motherhood. But the most satisfying development came on Friday afternoon, when David called with news about Biogen's initial response to his report. "Charlotte, I just got off the phone with Biogen's Director of Human Resources," David said, his voice containing barely controlled excitement. "They want to meet with me on Monday morning to discuss what they're calling serious allegations of policy violations and potential sexual harassment." What does that mean? It means they're taking this very seriously. The HR director specifically mentioned that Biogen has a zero-tolerance policy for sexual harassment and conflicts of interest, and that any violations would result in immediate termination and forfeiture of all benefits. David paused, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "But here's the really interesting part, Charlotte." During our conversation, the HR director mentioned that they'd recently received an anonymous tip about inappropriate behavior between Miles and Jessica. Someone else has already reported their relationship. My breath caught. Someone else reported them. That's what she said. Apparently, someone at Biogen noticed the relationship and reported it through their anonymous ethics hotline. The company was already conducting a preliminary investigation when I called. This was better than I'd hoped. If other Biogen employees had noticed and reported Miles's inappropriate relationship with Jessica, it meant the affair wasn't as secret as they'd believed. It also meant that Biogen was already aware of potential policy violations before I'd even contacted them, which would make it much harder for Miles to claim he was being unfairly targeted or that the relationship was consensual and appropriate. "What happens next?" I asked. "Biogen is going to conduct a formal investigation starting Monday morning. They'll interview Miles, Jessica, and any other employees who might have relevant information. Based on what they find, they'll make decisions about appropriate disciplinary action. And if they determine that Miles violated company policies, immediate termination, forfeiture of unvested stock options, and potential legal action if they determine the relationship constituted sexual harassment. Charlotte, Miles is about to discover that workplace affairs have consequences that extend far beyond personal relationships. That evening, I sat in the nursery that Miles and I had painted together just weeks earlier, folding the tiny clothes we'd chosen for our daughter, and thinking about the dramatic changes that had occurred in less than a week. The man who'd walked out on his pregnant wife was about to face professional consequences that would affect his ability to support his new family with Jessica. The elaborate deception he'd maintained for months was about to be exposed to his colleagues, his family, and potentially the broader professional community. But more than the satisfaction of seeing Miles face consequences for his actions, I felt a deep sense of empowerment and control over my situation. Instead of being the passive victim of his betrayal, I'd taken strategic action to protect my interests and hold him accountable for his choices. I'd assembled a team of professional advocates, gathered comprehensive evidence of his misconduct, and positioned myself for the most favorable possible outcome in every aspect of our separation. As our daughter performed her evening acrobatics routine, I placed my hands on my belly and spoke to her quietly. "Your daddy made some very poor choices, little one, but your mommy is going to make sure you're protected and provided for, no matter what happens next." Sunday evening, my phone rang, Miles's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity won out, and I answered. "Hello, Miles, Charlotte, we need to talk." His voice sounded strained and urgent, very different from the cold confidence he'd displayed when he walked out. "I thought we'd said everything that needed to be said." "Please, Charlotte. I got a call from HR at work. They want to meet with me tomorrow morning about some kind of complaint. I think someone reported my relationship with Jessica." I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "That's unfortunate, Charlotte, please. You have to understand how this looks. If Biogen fires me, I won't be able to support you and the baby, or Jessica and our son. This could ruin everything. Miles, are you calling to ask me to help you avoid the consequences of your affair with your subordinate employee? It's not like that. Yes, Jessica works for me, but our relationship is consensual. We're adults, and we love each other. This is about work politics and jealous colleagues, not about anything illegal or unethical." "I see. So you're saying that a 34-year-old married supervisor having a sexual relationship with his 24-year-old subordinate, resulting in pregnancy while he's married to someone else, isn't unethical?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. "Charlotte, I know you're angry, but destroying my career won't help anyone. If I lose my job, I can't pay child support or contribute to our daughter's expenses. Miles, let me be very clear about something. I didn't destroy your career. You did that yourself when you decided to have an affair with your subordinate while married and expecting a child. The consequences you're facing are the natural result of your choices, not some vindictive action on my part. You reported us, didn't you?" His voice was becoming more aggressive. "You called Biogen and filed some bullshit sexual harassment complaint." "Actually, I didn't, but it's interesting that you immediately assume that anyone reporting your relationship would be filing a sexual harassment complaint. That suggests you know your behavior was inappropriate and potentially illegal." Another long pause. "Charlotte, please, I'm asking you to help me get through this, for our daughter's sake. Miles, our daughter's welfare is exactly why I can't help you avoid the consequences of your actions. She deserves a father who takes responsibility for his choices and behaves ethically in all aspects of his life. If you're facing professional consequences for your affair, that's something you need to handle yourself." I hung up before he could respond. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with text messages from Miles, ranging from pleading to angry to threatening. I screenshotted all of them and forwarded them to Emily with a note, evidence of Miles attempting to manipulate me into protecting him from workplace consequences. Monday morning, I was in my office at work when Emily called with an update. "Miles showed up at Biogen this morning for his meeting with HR," she said. "David spoke with their attorney afterward. Apparently, the investigation didn't take long." "What did they find?" "Exactly what we expected. Multiple employees had observed inappropriate behavior between Miles and Jessica over the past several months. Hotel receipts charged to company accounts for trips where both Miles and Jessica were present but no other team members. Company credit card charges for expensive dinners and gifts that couldn't be justified as business expenses. Email records showing personal communications during work hours." Emily paused, and I could hear papers rustling. "But the most damaging evidence came from Jessica herself. Apparently, she broke down during her interview and admitted that the relationship had been ongoing since March, that Miles had told her he was planning to leave his wife, and that she was pregnant with his child. What was Biogen's response? Immediate termination for both Miles and Jessica. Forfeiture of all unvested stock options and benefits. And they're referring the case to their legal department to determine whether to pursue recovery of company funds that were misused during their affair. I felt a surge of satisfaction that was both personal and professional. Miles had not only betrayed his marriage, but had also violated his employer's trust by using company resources to support his affair. The consequences were exactly what his behavior deserved. There's more, Emily continued. David received a call from a reporter at the business journal that covers the biotech industry. Apparently, someone leaked information about Miles's termination, and they're planning to run a story about Biogen's commitment to their ethical standards. A news story? Nothing that names Miles specifically, but it will mention that Biogen recently terminated employees for sexual harassment and misuse of company resources. Given Miles's level of responsibility at the company, anyone in the industry will be able to figure out who was involved. The professional consequences were exceeding even my most optimistic expectations. Miles hadn't just lost his job, he'd damaged his reputation in an industry where ethical behavior and professional integrity were essential for career advancement. His affair with Jessica had not only cost him his marriage, but had also potentially ended his career in biotechnology. But the most immediate impact was financial. Miles had been counting on his salary and stock options to support both his new life with Jessica and his obligations to me and our daughter. Without his Biogen income, he would struggle to maintain the lifestyle he'd envisioned with his pregnant mistress, while also meeting his child support obligations. Tuesday morning brought another call from Emily, this time with news about Miles's desperate attempts to minimize the fallout from his termination. Miles contacted me yesterday afternoon, Emily said. He wants to discuss a settlement agreement that would expedite the divorce and finalize custody arrangements. What kind of settlement is he proposing? Full custody to you, minimal child support, and he's willing to sign over his interest in the house in exchange for protection from any future financial claims. I was quiet for a moment, processing this information. He's trying to limit his financial exposure because he knows he won't be able to support two families without his Biogen salary. Exactly. He's also probably worried that Jessica will leave him now that his career prospects have been destroyed. A 24-year-old woman with a master's degree and no children might not be interested in staying with an unemployed 34-year-old man with significant child support obligations. What's your recommendation? We don't accept his first offer, but we negotiate from a position of strength. You're holding all the cards, Charlotte. Miles needs this resolved quickly and quietly, and you can afford to wait for the best possible terms. Over the next 2 weeks, as I moved into the final stages of my pregnancy, the various consequences of Miles's betrayal continued to unfold in ways that exceeded my expectations. Jessica did indeed leave him, moving back in with her parents and reportedly considering whether to name Miles as the father on her child's birth certificate. Miles had moved into a studio apartment and was scrambling to find new employment in an industry where news of his misconduct had spread quickly through professional networks. Meanwhile, my life was stabilizing in positive ways. Patricia had moved into our guest room and was providing the emotional and practical support I needed during the final weeks of pregnancy. My job had granted me extended maternity leave, and my financial situation was secure thanks to my careful planning and Miles's willingness to sign over his interest in our assets. Most importantly, I felt prepared for single motherhood in ways I wouldn't have thought possible when Miles first announced his betrayal. The crisis had revealed strengths I didn't know I possessed and had connected me with resources and supporters I might not have otherwise discovered. 3 weeks after Miles walked out, I was in my Kit Sullivan, making breakfast when I felt the first unmistakable contraction. Patricia drove me to the hospital, and 12 hours later, Emma Grace Morrison entered the world, a healthy, beautiful daughter who would never know the chaos and betrayal that had marked her final month in utero. As I held Emma for the first time, I felt not sadness about Miles's absence, but profound gratitude for the circumstances that had revealed his true character before our daughter was born. She would grow up in a home with a mother who valued integrity and accountability, surrounded by family members who prioritized responsibility and commitment. Miles's attempt to contact me from the hospital waiting room was intercepted by Patricia, who delivered a message that perfectly summarized the situation. If you want to meet your daughter, you'll do it through proper legal channels after you've established paternity and negotiated visitation rights with Charlotte's attorney. Until then, you're not welcome here. The final resolution came when Emma was 6 weeks old. Miles agreed to a settlement that gave me full custody, established modest child support payments based on his reduced earning capacity, transferred the house entirely to my name, and included a confidentiality clause that prevented either of us from discussing the details of our divorce publicly. More importantly, the settlement included provisions for supervised visitation that would only take effect after Miles completed parenting classes and demonstrated consistent financial responsibility for a period of 1 year.